Combat Evolved, taking the world by storm, releasing towards the tail end of 2001, Halo would be incredibly influential for the gaming industry going forward. Serving as the initial launch title for the original Xbox, this first-person shooter would be many people's first introduction to the console. In the last episode, we took a look at the beloved Silent Hill 2, finding that without the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia, the game didn't hold up quite as well as people seem to remember. Initially, I was fully prepared for that to be the same case here, with the original Halo being the first in its franchise, as well as all the hype and praise it's received. I was nervous that it would fall into the same pitfall. Welcome to Game Disdain, where the name of the game is that we complain about games. I'm your host, AJ, and please come join me as we try to answer the question, does the first entry in the Halo franchise hold up, or did the popular FPS age like spoiled milk? So I finally played Halo Combat Evolved. Not only did I play it for the first time, but this will have been my very first experience with the Halo franchise entirely. Sure, I've seen the game played a handful of times when I was younger, but this would be the first time that I would actually pick up the controller for myself. Closest thing of Halo I ever had was just some Mega Blocks. Literally just the orange Spartan figure pack and a couple of flood weapons some random classmate in middle school gave me. Other than that, Halo was never really in my reach, having grown up with COD instead. I was a Nintendo kid, and my close buddy was a PlayStation kid, so COD was just the shooter that we played. And when it was finally time for me to get something other than a Nintendo console, I ended up getting a PS4. Sure, my other buddy ended up having an Xbox and a 360 growing up, but the only games we ever played were still COD and Minecraft. Ultimately, what this means is that I should have no attachment to Halo whatsoever. No rose-tinted glasses to get in the way of a proper review, nor any negative bias that would get in the way either. So, let's get started, shall we? Instead of going through each category of what makes up a game like I did in the last video, I think I'm going to discuss things as the game itself progresses, going along with my experience rather than having to retread the same territory quite as much. So, what were my first impressions of the game that not only started a massive FPS franchise, but also paved the way for one of the three biggest console platforms of the modern era? After popping the disc into the Xbox and loading up the game, you are presented with Halo's title screen, being greeted by one of the most masterful and memorable pieces of music that has ever graced video games throughout its history. After choosing the single player and selecting a difficulty, you were immediately dropped into a cutscene. That I couldn't even hear. I'm not sure why, my capture card picks up the audio just fine. It may just be that the speakers on this old thing may actually just be going. Which is weird, because the first Silent Hill sounds just fine on the same volume level. At least after doubling the volume, I can actually start the game proper. You are thrown right into the thick of it, as the Pillar of Autumn, a ship of the United Nations Space Command, is under attack from enemy Covenant ships. Kinda reminds me of another massive sci-fi property, starting out with a ship under siege from an enemy empire. Given only a few moments to breathe after the fall of Reach, Captain Jacob Keyes instructs Cortana, no, not that one, to wake up an old friend. That old friend is none other than the man himself, Master Chief. That's you. After being woken from cryosleep, you are instructed to follow some diagnostic tests. This is essentially your tutorial, teaching you the basic movements and giving you the option to invert your aiming controls, something I immediately opted out of. I'm not the biggest fan of inverted controls in games, the only exception really being the OG Star Wars Battlefront 2 space battles, but that's only because I grew up on that. I didn't really play PC games until middle school, so I ended up missing the inverted controls era entirely. Once you get a grasp of basic walking and looking around, you recharge your energy shields and then the guy above you gets attacked by a Covenant elite. This is your signal to get the hell out and make your way to the control deck, meeting up with Captain Keyes. You quickly install Windows 10 onto your helmet to keep Cortana safe, and then you are given your weapons to fight your way out to a usable escape pod. So, the game's combat. Well, it's a twin-stick first-person shooter. Very, very standard. Walk with the left stick, aim with the right, and then use the right trigger to shoot. Now, this may seem standard to us, living in the modern age where this control scheme is commonplace, but back then, this wasn't always the case. Of course, there were some games back then that used some form of twin-stick method, oddly enough, one early example being GoldenEye, which had that weird dual controller method that used each stick from the two controllers, but dual analog was not the norm. Halo revolutionized first-person shooters, introducing twin-stick to a much wider audience, while innovating upon it by adding sticky aim to make aiming on a controller just a little bit easier. Nowadays, a majority of first-person shooters are twin sticks. From COD to Siege to Payday. Hell, even Doom, the mother of all first-person shooters, adopted it. Now, while Halo's controls were quite innovative, in my opinion, I don't think that controlling the game itself feels all that great here. However, I don't believe that it's the fault of the controls exactly, but more like that it's the fault of the weapons themselves. The assault rifle especially just feels like a rapid-fire pea shooter, with its shots not really feeling like they carry any weight. The pistol was okay, but I only really ever found it satisfying to be used as a melee weapon against grunts. Now, while you start out with these weapons, you don't have to keep them. This game introduces the ability to pick up dead enemies' weapons or even random ones off of the ground, trading it for whatever is in your hands at the time. This is a feature a lot more common in modern games, but back then I don't really think we saw a lot of this, and it's utilized really well in this game, as you'll find spots in levels with weapons that you may want to use against upcoming enemies, or if you run out of ammo, you'll at least not be left completely defenseless. However, I feel that the enemy Covenant weapons aren't really all that great either. The plasma pistol isn't too bad. You can hold the trigger to charge a shot, which can instantly break through an enemy's shield, but I found that it still didn't feel the best to use. The plasma rifle feels decent enough, and keeps enemies stunned while you're shooting them. Finally, for right now anyways, is the Needler. I can't tell if I like or hate this weapon. See, it fires these little needles that stick into an enemy and explodes, and with enough needles, you can typically insta-kill an enemy. The problem is, this gun, and honestly many of the others, just don't feel all that great to shoot, due to the sound design. To be fair to Halo, I'm used to a lot more modern games that have punchier and louder sounding guns, and recoil to match. So this may very well be a case of a modern gamer plays an older game and just doesn't like how it feels, since most games back then, their guns sounded and felt weak. You also get grenades that you can use the left trigger to throw and the black button to swap between. Though, I only ever typically use the plasma grenades, which are essentially just sticky grenades. The plasma grenades are amazing, taking out most things regardless of if their shield is up, And so if you can land them directly on an enemy that's giving you trouble, they're fucked. And I didn't really end up using the regular grenades because anytime I tried to, they seemed to roll as far away from the enemy as they possibly could. Now remember, while you may have all of these as options, the Covenant can use most of them against you as well. I have died way too many times from needler shots overwhelming me, leaving me to the point where all I can do is just stand there and accept my fate. And don't even get me started on enemy plasma grenades. Speaking of the enemy Covenant, let's briefly talk about them too. Right now, the main two you have to deal with are the elites and the grunts. Grunts are the little guys that still speak English, while elites are the guys that say the funny thing. Grunts are easy to kill, only requiring a few shots or a couple melee hits to take them out, while elites have energy shields like you do, making them much more annoying to kill. After fighting against these guys as you make your way to the escape pod, you're able to hop in and finish the mission. A very standard kind of start to a sci-fi space adventure. The Pillar of Autumn, the mission, not the ship, didn't wow me, but I didn't hate it either. It was just very middle of the road. Moving on to mission 2, you crash land on the ring world known as Halo, and it has only taken 2 missions for us to come full circle since the title screen. Get it? Full circle? You know, cause it's a ring. Also, how many things in this game need to be called Halo? The game itself, the ring world, and even this mission being called Halo? Next thing you know, there'll be an enemy called Halo, and fuck it, why not a weapon called Halo? So many fucking Halos. Anyway, leaving your pod, you find that Halo is incredibly beautiful, first and foremost. Before getting into anything else, this mission, and overall the game as a whole, is just absolutely stunning when it comes to its art direction. Just look at this! I'm playing on a washed out CRT and it still looks incredible. This level, as well as several of the others, namely the ones that don't keep you stuck in some bunker or facility, look incredible, even for the time. Back to the game, Covenant ships are overhead and you need to hide. Or be dumb like me and just kinda get caught out in the open and be forced to engage them. I guess you're just supposed to hug the cliff wall and hope not to get caught? When I tried to fact check this, I got it from this Games Facts guide that was written in 2007. It seemed to kinda work, but I couldn't figure out how to get all the way to where I needed to be without getting spotted. But if you can avoid it long enough, then you can kind of just ignore them even when they shoot at you, at least at lower difficulties. You're to look for other survivors, and it doesn't take long before finding a few Marines having taken refuge at a few structures under attack from Covenant ships. You help them out, and then you wait for an evac for the survivors, taking out more ships as you wait. This level introduces a new enemy type, the Jackal. These little guys carry an energy shield on their arm to protect themselves, so it's usually easier to take them out with a well-placed grenade, or on lower difficulties, just get up close and melee them, like I did. Once the evac ship arrives, she drops off a Warthog for you to use for the rest of the mission. Now that we've been introduced to vehicles, we might as well talk about them. Controlling vehicles feels honestly pretty rough. You control the Warthog by holding forward with the left stick and turning with the right, tying turning to the camera. While these controls aren't great, they could still work if the vehicles themselves actually felt good to control, especially the Warthog. Don't get me wrong, it's really cool to be able to just hop in and drive in such an old game, but this thing just feels so damn heavy. Turning this thing is a bit of a nightmare, and if it ends up even slightly in midair, don't be surprised if it flips on you completely, kicking you out once it lands. Thankfully, the developers must have realized how janky the vehicles are, because Bungie left you the ability to just flip the vehicle at the press of the X button. It's pretty dumb that Halo had this all the way back in 2001, and yet most modern games don't. Looking at you, GTA 5, I shouldn't have to buy a separate gun just to get my vehicle unstuck. It doesn't even work well either. So yeah, vehicles in the original Halo kinda suck. It isn't as much of a problem in this mission as it is in later ones, especially the final mission. But what is an issue is that this level feels pretty aimless and very empty. See, the game is kinda semi-open world. You spend the rest of the mission searching for survivors and helping them out in this fairly open level. The problem is, aside from the enemies and the occasional structure, I found this level to feel pretty empty. It was fairly easy to get lost in this mission due to it being so empty, as well as not having any clear direction on where to go, especially here. Now, I'm not saying I need a marker to tell me where to go at every single point in a game. That's something modern games do way too much. But I could have used at least a little more direction. Don't get me wrong, I think it's pretty impressive they were able to do this at all. The game doesn't even have loading screens in the levels themselves. It just freezes when entering different areas, informing you that it's loading, which can be a bit immersion breaking, but it's still cool that it can keep all of this loaded in the way that it does. I know that this is the same generation that the GTA trilogy that everybody loves was introduced, but I really do find it impressive that these consoles were capable of such things, especially since open world games are more typically associated with the HD generation. But the problem is, what is the point of all of this open world space if there's nothing to fill it with? Reminds me a lot of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Field in that way, although it's not as bad here in Halo as it is there. Thankfully, the problem seems to get better throughout the game, as the level design seems to get a bit more focused and interesting, using landmarks in the landscape to guide the player naturally. Now, what does make up this field is a decent amount of combat, obviously. Let's double back to that real quick. I saved the extra bit of depth to talk about the combat here, because I think that the less cramped space is more suited to it rather than the previous mission. Halo's combat feels very different from other more grounded shooters right out of the gate, namely due to two things: the lack of sprint, and believe it or not, jumping of all things. First, you cannot sprint in this game. You just move with the analog stick and that's it. As of right now, I have not played the multiplayer in this game, but I can see how the lack of sprint makes a huge difference in terms of movement. You have to be much more optimized in your movements than if you could sprint around a corner or suddenly just bolt in a different direction. From the single player perspective though, this pushes the player to take in the atmosphere of the levels, as well as take things more methodically in terms of the combat. You can't just easily sprint out of the way of fire, meaning if you don't manage your health or even your shield well, it'll be a lot harder to get out of a sticky situation. However, there is an option still at your disposal, and this is the biggest thing that makes the combat feel so different, at least when it comes to the controls. Likely to make it feel like you're actually fighting in outer space rather than on Earth, the gravity is much lighter. Jumping sends you pretty high into the air, and even in some cases, can feel like it sends you flying. While it can feel a bit janky, being more familiar with not even bothering with the jump button in most shooters, it actually works really well here. It can make for a good way to dodge fire from the enemy, while also giving you time to rain down some hellfire yourself. However, jumping will also mostly lock you in the direction you were moving, due to it being more floaty, meaning that if you were to jump at a bad time, it can easily be taken advantage of because you can't really move out of it. It's a very unique feeling of combat, and honestly, I enjoy it, as weird as it feels in first person. I don't usually mind floatier combat, and can typically thrive off of it in other games, seeing as I'm a Lucas and Ness main in Smash. Of course, the diverse weapon types help differentiate the shooter further from other more grounded shooters like COD and Battlefield as well. And even in the single player, this felt pretty good, and the combat overall feels pretty rewarding, even if it can be a little frustrating sometimes. We will get to you, you pesky little bastards. What helps the combat in single player feel so great though is definitely the enemies. Their AI is incredible for their time. While being both immersive and well-functioning, the enemy AI feels somewhat, well, intelligent compared to most other games of the time. Even with grenade spam still being prevalent, which does feel pretty brain dead, the AI will actually interact well when engaging the player. Elites will jump from side to side to avoid gunfire, and when paired with their energy shields, they can be a real challenge to deal with. Grunts will flee when their elite commander is killed, seeking cover and becoming a lot easier to pick off. And enemies will even roll or dive out of the way of your vehicle, and they're pretty good at it too. All of this enemy behavior adds up to really immerse you in the combat, and it aged surprisingly well. I ended up enjoying the combat a lot, even with the less than satisfactory feeling guns. Moving back to finishing the mission, you spend the rest of it searching for more Marines, finding some crashed pods with first aid kits and ammo along the way that can be put to good use. You end up underground for a moment, but you're still just searching for surviving Marines. Fighting off some more Covenant, eventually the evac ship will arrive, allowing you to escape from the ring world safely. A bit of a mixed bag for this mission, probably my least favorite in the whole game, but it still had good art, I suppose. Mission 3, The Truth and Reconciliation, immediately feels different, taking place in a desert area at night, as well as being somewhat of a stealth mission, which is an immediate plus for me. This is where the first new weapon appears, the sniper rifle. It's a sniper rifle, what do you expect? Pick off your enemies from a distance by taking aim down the scope, which is nicely equipped with a night vision lens, and hit your mark. This weapon actually feels pretty good to use, and is one of the better weapons you can get, especially out of the Marines arsenal. It comes in pretty handy here specifically as well, as you start running into grunts that decide to hop into turrets, which can hit you pretty hard, so it's easier to take those out from a distance. You'll also find grunts that are just having a nice little nap on the ground randomly. It has nothing to do with the sniper rifle, I just think it's a nice little detail that adds to the well-developed AI. This mission has you navigating cliff sides and rocky terrain, as you try to make your way to a Covenant ship in order to board it and be able to go rescue Captain Keyes. Now normally, these rocky cliff areas in games can look pretty dull, just due to the very bland desert colors. Halo's art direction here though helps keep things looking pretty. The night sky for one is a good contrast against the sandy desert, but even things such as the purple turrets the grunt uses, or even the enemies themselves, help add a pop of color against the otherwise bland earthy tones. I am once again impressed by this game's art, because I've really grown to hate how these desert cliffs can tend to look due to preferring more color than just various shades of brown. Here, they're able to keep the level more colorful even in this dry and rocky environment, and it's just so damn pretty. This level is way less open than the previous mission, and that's to its benefit, not only changing things up, but the level feels more focused and less aimless. You're also given plenty of varied terrain to scale, giving you plenty of different angles to use your new sniper rifle on. Right at the start, for instance, you can aim through the crack in the terrain to get a good shot onto the enemy, immediately getting the jump on them. Or other areas where you can snipe from above or even from below, required to scale around a cliffside. But that's only a small part of the mission. You'll arrive at a point where you need to hop onto a gravity lift. More enemies will spawn here, introducing you to the Hunter. This hulking bastard hits hard, and can be pretty hard to hit, their shield blocking a majority of any damage you send their way. The thing is, they have this orange spot on their body, so if you can get behind them and blast that, they should fall pretty quickly. After hopping onto the gravity lift, you end up boarding the ship that Keys is captured on, and immediately you get even more color, as the Covenant ship is filled with magentas, blues, and purples. Here, you get swarmed by quite a few enemies, including a new elite who keeps themselves invisible, attacking you with a plasma sword. They can do good damage too, and can easily take you by surprise, so it's best to snipe them from a distance if you can spot them before they activate their camouflage. The Covenant ship is quite maze-like, and can be a bit disorienting, having many twists, turns, and even a few dead ends, but overall is still quite navigable. After fighting your way to the cell block, you rescue Captain Keys, and learn from Cortana that the Covenant believes that Halo is some sort of super weapon, and they've been searching for the control center for it. Keys stresses that the Marines need to beat him to it, so you and your team have to fight your way back out. Now it's time for everybody's favorite pastime, an escort mission! If Keys dies, you'll have to restart from your last checkpoint. Thankfully, this isn't too bad of an escort mission anyway, as it doesn't take long for you to reach the Covenant dropship you steal for your evac. That ends the third mission, leaving my first impressions of Halo quite mixed. As I went into the script, I remember feeling a lot more negative about the experience overall, but as I really got into the nitty-gritty of talking about the diverse combat, enemy AI, and art direction, I felt I was being a bit too harsh. So, I've dialed back my opinion a little bit. However, I do think there are still some issues present. I really don't like the second mission specifically. It's the only mission I ever really got lost in, to the point that I had to take a break and come back later. The first mission to me is barely even a footnote and kinda just blends together for me. However, the third mission really started to show me something special, and is one of my favorite missions out of the 10 available here. Now then, let's wrap up my first impressions so we can really start digging into the meat of Halo Combat Evolved. Having a bit of a rough start, Halo Combat Evolved struggled to leave a good first impression. While the first mission was standard enough to be excused, easing the player into things, the second mission really seemed to struggle. Feeling aimless due to its size, the almost empty level is dotted with very few points of interest. The combat is what will keep one engaged, especially with its diverse mechanics and immersive enemy AI. But once there are no Covenant left to slay, it can be quite easy to get lost in the open fields without any clear direction. The poor driving mechanics only further exacerbate this issue, making navigating the larger level more of a pain rather than an enjoyable cruise. The third mission, however, was able to grab a hold of the reins and pull them in. The sniper rifle provides the player with a new weapon to use, diversifying their options while feeling satisfying, making it stand out amongst the other weaker and less satisfying weapons. The ever-strong art direction mixed with well-crafted level design shows that Halo was able to find its footing. Now the question remains, can Halo Combat Evolved keep that footing, or will it slip, plummeting to its own demise? So, first impressions were a little shaky, but they weren't horrible either. Let's hope that as we go deeper into the game, we get to see more of that spark that we saw in the Truth and Reconciliation. The fourth mission's opening cutscene has Cortana informing us that the Covenant currently are searching for a map room that will lead them directly to the control center mentioned prior. This map room is called the Silent Cartographer, which is also what the level is named after. We need to track this map room down, searching through different bunkers throughout the level, clearing them out until we find it. As the cutscene ends and we land on the beach, you're immediately thrown into combat, with Covenant and Marines alike taking shots at each other. This level is also somewhat open, similar to the second mission. However, this level feels a lot more focused in its level design, with plenty of interesting landmarks and areas to traverse through, rather than just a bunch of open fields. However, this level is also pretty simple, as you basically just search for the map room and kill off enemies. You do get to drive the Warthog around some more, but that isn't really anything to write home about. You find the map room, leave the bunker it was found in, and then evac. While this level was fairly simple and straightforward, it took the open design from the second mission and did a much better job, not feeling aimless or super easy to get lost in. So even though it wasn't all that special, it at least improved upon a prior issue, which is great. You also apparently can find the rocket launcher on this mission, which I somehow missed, but I'll still briefly mention it here. It's a rocket launcher. It launches rockets. Rockets blow up enemies. Pretty straightforward. It feels alright to use, if you like using rocket launchers. It does its job, and it sucks when it's used against you. That's really all I have to say about them. Mission 5, Assault in the Control Room, is pretty self-explanatory. You're dropped right in front of some Covenant, and just like with the Silent Cartographer, you are immediately thrown right into combat. This mission is fairly straightforward as well. This time, you find yourself in a more snowy environment, and usually, I'm not the biggest fan of snowy environments in games, but this one ain't half bad. This level is yet again more open, but not aimless. The mission does a good job of guiding the player along without needing waypoints, and you'll find yourself traversing through both the snowy fields as well as the more bunker-like facilities. You get to use a vehicle in this one as well, but instead of using the crappy Warthog, you run into a few Covenant vehicles. These feel so much better to drive, and can actually dish out damage without needing a partner in the vehicle. You get some vehicle-on-vehicle combat here too, and it feels pretty damn good. At least sometimes. Sometimes the vehicle combat can feel like it drags on a little bit too long, because the vehicles can be pretty tanky, which can be frustrating when you die before another checkpoint, because then you'll have to slowly whittle down the enemy vehicle's health again. Not too bad though. After playing through the mission, you will arrive in the control room, and Cortana will give you some vague and cryptic spiel about how the Covenant has found something that they're afraid of. I wonder what that could be. Don't worry, Cortana doesn't tell you what the concern is. The most she gives you is that there's no time, and we need to stop the captain, who's searching for a weapons cache. Hightailing it out of there, you proceed on to the next mission. Overall, both missions 4 and 5 are very simple and nothing too special. They're decent missions without many complaints, but nothing too exciting to wow me either. Luckily, Mission 6, 343 Guilty Spark, makes up for that and more. By far my favorite mission in this game. You're dropped into a new location, and immediately you can see something is wrong. Grunts are fleeing from something in the cutscene. So, where the hell are we? We seem to have landed in some sort of swamp, and damn, does it look beautiful. Yet another case of this game's art direction holding strong. Even with its beauty, you can still feel a sense of danger here, the atmosphere giving off a bit of a creepy and lonely feeling. Doesn't help that Cortana stayed behind in the control room, leaving you completely alone for this mission. After a couple of small skirmishes with the Covenant, and me getting lost for 10 minutes running in circles because I'm apparently blind, you enter a bunker as you search for the captain. Things seem normal at first, but you quickly realize that something happened here, finding Covenant blood spattered on the floor in different areas, even smeared all over the place in some rooms. Something is seriously wrong here, and I love this atmospheric buildup. Opening a door, a fellow Marine falls out, having been killed at some point, and so you quickly move his body as you enter the room he fell out from. Finding a helmet on the ground, you insert the recording drive into your helmet, and you are treated to what is essentially found footage, analog style and everything. A Marine named Jenkins had landed in this swamp prior to us, along with his squad and even Captain Keyes. You see them go through the swamp, skipping through footage here and there. They find a dead Covenant's body, but something is off about it. Something seems to have gotten to it, and as the Marine states, scrambled its insides. Fast forwarding one more time, they enter the room you're currently in, and after a bit of banter, they hear something scuttling around inside the room. Small green creatures start flooding in, and it doesn't take long before the squad is completely surrounded and overrun. Jenkins falls to the ground, and the footage is cut off with an error. Welp, that doesn't bode well for you at all. Sure enough, as you look around the room, the threat that got the other Marines make their appearance. This is the Flood, specifically the infection form, and they aren't that dangerous, really, as long as you keep your distance and specifically keep your shields up. They can do negligible damage to your energy shield, but the moment that shield is gone, they can easily pile on damage and overwhelm you, so be careful. It doesn't take much to kill them though, as any amount of damage will make them pop, and with the little splash damage they cause, it can cause a chain reaction on the swarm, usually eliminating most of it. I, however, did not know this, and treated them like an actual parasite, trying to avoid taking any damage from them, as I was afraid that it would actually infect the chief. The room swarms with these things, and you spend some time taking them out before a few of the combat form floods show up, which are a bit more annoying. They mostly stick to meleeing you and have a longer range than other enemies, so definitely keep your distance. Plasma weapons won't work on them, but peppering them with bullets will eventually take them down. After clearing out the room for a little while, your objective will update, telling you to escape, with an exclamation point indicating urgency. You fight your way through the bunker, running into Flood and Covenant fighting as you make your escape. Partway through, you come across the final weapon, a shotgun, and it's pretty much the best weapon in the game. It can one-shot a majority of enemies, as long as you're close enough, and the distance required is pretty reasonable. You don't have to be hugging them for the shotgun to take them out. As you escape up the final lift, you regroup with some fellow Marines and make your way outside into the swamp, fighting more Flood along the way. Eventually, you'll reach a tower where you'll see lasers target the Flood, coming from some small floating robots. They seem to be of no threat to you, but who is your mysterious savior? None other than what the level was named after, a different small floating robot named 343 Guilty Spark. It explains that with the Flood having been released, his function is to prevent them from spreading past Halo, and that he needs your help in doing so. From here, he teleports you away, causing the Marines to lose your signal as you're sent to who knows where. I'm sure this is fine. Absolutely nothing bad could possibly come from this. And that was Mission 6. Not bad. Not bad at all. I was not expecting this to turn into a horror game, but I sure as hell am not complaining. See, when I had heard of the Flood in the past from friends mentioning Halo, I didn't think they would appear in the first game. I assumed that the first game would be entirely focused on the battle between the Marines and Covenant. So their arrival was entirely unexpected, even though this game is over 20 years old. Not only that, but the atmosphere of the swamp was incredible, and the mission is entirely unique in the way that it looks. While it's arguable that it has the most life in it, with all of the flora throughout the swamp, it feels so much more lonely and lifeless, even compared to the rocky areas of the third mission or the snowy areas of the previous one. I thoroughly enjoyed this level, and it's definitely the best one in the game, at least in my personal opinion. It seems the game is rapidly improving from my complaints earlier. Let's just hope the game can keep it up. While initially, Halo Combat Evolved had difficulty finding its footing, the game was able to stand firmly on its feet, demonstrating that it could learn rather quickly from its prior issues. While the second mission had the issue of being too open and aimless, the fourth and fifth missions took that initial open design and were able to improve upon it, giving it more focus and interesting level design. They may have not been perfect missions, but they showed what an open level could look like without causing confusion. While vehicle usage had a rough start as well, that seemed to change come the fifth mission. With the Warthog being a nightmare to drive, the Ghost seems to have better control, making it bearable to use. The sixth mission, while not only completely throwing the player off guard with the introduction of the Flood, the way they are introduced via found footage is executed almost perfectly. The strong art direction and atmosphere only serves to add to the mission's prowess, leaving a very strong impression. On top of that, the introduction of the shotgun further diversified the player's arsenal, and much like the sniper rifle before it, was actually satisfying to use. Overall, the middle of the game seems to be on the up and up. So now the question has shifted. Can Halo keep its momentum, or will it run out of steam, stopping dead in its tracks? We only have a little over a third of the game left at this point, so let's just jump right in. Let's head to the library. What? That's the name of the level. 343 informs us upon our arrival that we need the index before we activate the installation. Remember all of the praise of the improved open level design earlier? Well, this level is entirely linear, and not in a good way. It's basically just a combat challenge. You go from room to room, clearing out waves of flood along the way, stopping every so often for Mr. Guilty Spark here to open a door. You don't really do anything aside from fight here. To be fair, the combat challenge itself is pretty good. The way they funnel all these enemies through these different holes keeps you engaged and on your toes without really feeling unfair. You have to keep an eye on your surroundings because the enemies won't always come from right in front of you. So if you get too focused on taking care of a group of enemies, you might get jumped from an area you were ignoring. What also helps these combat sections is the way that the Flood themselves all function in tandem with one another. First, there is a new enemy type here, the carrier form of the Flood. They are these gross-looking walking sacks of infection, walking up to you before tripping and exploding, which can be devastating. And they even release a few of the little infection guys as well. They were the main reason I died in this level, but they're actually pretty easy to handle. Just keep your distance even when shooting them because they'll explode after getting shot too. So you have the carrier forms trying to suicide rush you, which can deal large damage if they succeed. The little infection forms can kill you quick if your shields are down, and then the combat form is kind of a problem no matter the distance. Some of them are carrying rifles here, so you'll probably want to get in close to quickly negate their damage, especially if you're using the shotgun. But of course you'll have the melee ones lunging at you, so getting in close can be a pain. And some are even carrying shotguns of their own, which is a giant yikes. This basically forces you to constantly keep moving. However, most of the rooms aren't the most open here. They're pretty tight, so you have to stay vigilant and try to plan your moves and shots around them. The more that I think about it, it kind of reminds me of running a train in COD Zombies, outmaneuvering the zombies and constantly staying on the move. Also, due to the tight space, grenades can be a lot more dangerous to use here because you can easily blow yourself up if you aren't careful. Especially plasma grenades, because if it sticks to an enemy that's constantly running towards you, you may just eat your own grenade. After fighting several waves of flood and waiting for several doors to be opened, you'll be aided by more robots like 343, shooting lasers at the flood, which makes fighting them at least a little easier. It isn't much later before you'll retrieve the index, which Guilty Spark will quickly snatch out of your hand. While that may have seemed very rude, he merely insists it's because you're prone to infection, being an organic life form and all. According to the robot, the flood is spreading across Halo quickly, so we need to hurry. You are teleported away, and that ends the 7th mission. From a level design standpoint, I found this mission to be very boring. You walk through samey hallways and wait for doors to open. Nothing really interesting happens, although I do understand that after coming from Mission 6, they may have wanted to just keep things a little bit simpler. My issue is with how the linearity was handled. Being linear isn't necessarily bad, but there wasn't much to the level design itself. Sure, there were a couple of boxes to work as cover, but when your enemies are primarily focused on rushing you, it's not like they help much. I think my main issue is there isn't really any verticality or interesting landmarks aside from the area the index itself is located. Thankfully, the combat is abundant enough to keep you engaged, and that part is pretty fun and challenging enough without being infuriating. The level isn't horrible or anything, it's just kinda boring in its presentation. Picking up right where we left off, 343 teleports us right back to the control center. Apparently, it doesn't have the authorization to activate the installation, meaning you have to do it. So we insert the index into the machine and a problem arises. That problem being Cortana, who you left here when you went to go investigate the flood situation initially. Her and the chief have an argument back and forth about what you're doing before it's revealed that the little robot pal over there is the bad guy. In a sense, activating the weapon inside Halo would destroy not the flood, but the flood's food. That means you, the Covenant, humanity, or any other life form really. Activating Halo's weapon essentially means erasing life itself from the galaxy. Something little 343 failed to mention. After confirming with the bastard that it's true, he brings in more of his robot friends, threatening to take the index from you by force. You stand your ground with him teleporting away, and it's time to fight back. After you clear out the robots, Cortana thinks it'd be best to locate the Pillar of Autumn and trigger an explosion with the ship's fusion reactor. This should destabilize Halo and hopefully thwart the little robot shit's plans. This level is essentially Mission 5, but backwards. Same areas, you just tend to travel them in reverse. Cortana tasks us with blowing up some pulse generators to buy us some time. At this point, these last 3 levels are essentially just combat challenges now, throwing a lot of enemies at you, and even on normal, it's pretty challenging. There was this one section, right after being told to destroy the generators, where you need to commandeer a Banshee, and you have to fight through a good amount of enemies before you can get to it. And I got stuck on that for just under 10 minutes. Speaking of the Banshee, while you may be traveling backwards, you also get to travel upwards, having to use the Banshee to fly up to different points. And since this is the same map as Mission 5, you get a lot of opportunity to use both long-range and short-range weapons, which is a nice touch. I like the variety that this offers. Of course, you'll get into some vehicle fights, which I can take or leave here. As I mentioned before, vehicle fights can be a bit tedious when the vehicles you're fighting are a bit too tanky. And some of the dog fights that you have to do here are unfortunately like that. Wouldn't be so bad if you didn't turn at a snail's pace in this game. Feels like I'm fighting against an ocean current just to aim this damn thing. This mission will basically throw everything you've ever fought before at you here, be it the Covenant, the Flood, or even more of the Sentinel robots. This is essentially challenging you on everything you've learned so far, as a game should when it reaches the later stages. There isn't much more to the mission past this. Just go from generator to generator, fighting off whatever is thrown at you and destroy them. Sure, you have to destroy the generators by literally walking into them, which removes your shield, leaving you vulnerable for a moment, but it doesn't take too much time to find cover in those instances, so you're really never in too much danger for long, though it does add a small bit of challenge. You do go down into the tunnels, and I got stuck on that damn bridge for another 5 minutes. Anyway, you blow up the last generator and Cortana informs you that she's figured out how to use the same teleporting tech that Guilty Spark was using, but that it's too dangerous to be used more than once. So the chief has her teleport him away, thus ending Mission 8 to Betrayals. This was a good and challenging level without too much bullshit, and while the reuse of a map isn't something I'm usually fond of, I don't necessarily hate it here. Adding the vehicle flight and reversal traversal, as well as throwing every enemy you've ever seen at you, changes things up just enough to help the level feel more fresh, and arguably more interesting than the mission that the map is taken from. I'd like to take just a small pause in the video to talk about the music. Since we are nearing the end of the game, I figured it'd be best to really tackle the music now. It'll be brief, but I can't talk about this game without at least mentioning it. This game's soundtrack is pretty damn good. I think that's pretty obvious. After all, this game is the origin of what is arguably the main anthem for gaming as a whole. That's immediately going to put it up there by default. So yeah, not only is it responsible for that, but the entire soundtrack is arguably pure gold. Like, just listen to the track Brothers in Arms real quick. It starts out epic like this, right? Then it gets more and more grand until it transitions into this. It's so beautiful, I just want to cry, man. You've got plenty of tracks that just give off this adventurous vibe, really making you feel like you're exploring some unknown territory, like Perilous Journeys. It plays at a few points during the game, like when the Sentinels are attacking you in the mission we just talked about. You got Under Cover of Night playing during the final run checkpoint of the same mission, as well as a small part of the Truth and Reconciliation, which is just a vibe. And of course we can't forget What Once Was Lost, which plays during my favorite mission. It just fills you with this sense of unease. The swamp ambience only managing to add to that as you investigate the crash site. Martin O'Donnell created something truly special here with the soundtrack. Not many first-person shooters, hell, not many games at the time had such an atmospheric soundtrack like this. Don't get me wrong, plenty of old games had great soundtracks, but this one is just so incredibly unique, especially for its time. The soundtrack has definitely earned my praises. Now, let's get back to finishing the game. Mission 9, Keys, puts you back on the same ship as Truth and Reconciliation, the only cruiser that is likely even still usable. Turns out, Keys is still alive and Cortana has his signal. She gets you in as close as she can, which apparently means upside down inside the ship. After crashing your head on some metal, your goal is to find the captain. It looks like both the Covenant and Flood are interested in this pretty purple ship, meaning you'll be dealing with a lot of them on your way to finding Keys. This mission may arguably be the hardest in the entire game. I definitely feel like I died the most here. Since this is the same ship as the third mission, the tight corridors of the ship plus the sheer amount of enemies thrown at you definitely make this a hell of a lot harder. This isn't a bad thing either, for the most part. This level was a welcome challenge. The tight corridors really make the Flood specifically a massive threat, because you really don't have any space to maneuver. One carrier form can spell immediate death for you if you aren't careful. Early on, you'll hear a transmission of Keys telling you to not be a fool and leave him behind. The transmission quickly ends, and pretty soon you'll come across a massive hole in the ship that you can't cross. Your only option now is to just jump into the canyon below. Covenant and Flood are fighting down here, a full-scale battle at this point. Trying to fight your way through is not easy, just due to the large abundance of enemies. Of course, you could let them finish each other off to whittle down their numbers, but guess who didn't realize stealth was even an option here? Yep, I kind of ignored the stealth mechanics in Halo, mainly because, like many other games where stealth isn't the primary focus, the shoehorned in stealth features tend to not really work, or at the very least, it isn't very clear how they're supposed to work. Like in the second mission where you're supposed to hide from the Covenant patrols. You're just told to hide, no direction is given, and the solution is to just hug a wall until you get past the patrols. That's not stealth. If anything, it's almost like one of those bugs where the loading zone for spawning enemies wasn't measured out right, which just allows you to prevent them from spawning to begin with. Anyway, not a huge deal. We can move on from that. Since I fought my way through the canyon, I had a hell of a time, dying over and over from the overwhelming force just tearing me to shreds. After getting through a few canyons, you'll arrive at a gravity lift that'll take you back into the ship. Once inside the ship, you fight your way through more enemies before eventually getting to the control room, where there is this nasty looking mass made by the Flood. On approach, you find out from Cortana that unfortunately Keys is a part of that mass. Rest in peace, Captain Keys. I liked you. You slam your hand through that gross mass to get the code from what's left of Keys, before having to fight your way out of the control room to try to find the Pillar of Autumn as instructed by Cortana. This spot was pretty rough, as you get swarmed by an alarming amount of Flood, and so I died quite a few times here too. Eventually, I got out of that mess only to get to the hangar. We're almost there now. You start at the top of the hangar and need to steal a Covenant vehicle to escape. Instead of doing things the easy way by hopping down level by level, I once again decided to do things the hard way. I fought through the hallways, slowly making my way down to the bottom level of the hangar. And this is where I remember explicitly dying an annoying amount of times. I've teased it throughout the video, and so I'm finally gonna say it. Fuck the enemies using plasma grenades! I had to redo this goddamn checkpoint for another 10 minutes because I'd whittle the elites down to 1 or 2 of them, and then they'd grenade spam me until eventually one would stick. You'll be absorbed in a gunfight, and then you'll have that moment where you notice the light blue glow at the corner of your screen, and then you'll just freeze briefly, realizing you're fucked. You're not coming back from that. And then you'll spend an agonizing amount of time refighting your way back to a spot, only to have to repeat the damn process as the blue ball of death that you've likely relied plenty on up to this point betrays you, homing onto you and attaching itself to where you have no choice but to embrace death. Grenade spam is obnoxiously prevalent in this game, though it seems to be based on the distance between you and the enemy. Of course, I didn't know that until after beating the game, so a whole lot of good that tidbit does me now. As frustrating as the grenade spam is, it was incredibly common in a majority of shooters at this time. Looking at you, Finest Hour. Hell, even in the next generation it was a problem. It became a World of War meme for a reason. So, as frustrated as I am with it in Halo, I take solace in the fact that it isn't as bad as Finest Hour. After getting through that bullshit, you can finally get a Covenant vehicle and get the hell out of there. Fuck, that mission was hard. While it was mostly reasonable, the grenade spam at the end really left an impact on me. Of course, there were ways around it, but my dumbass didn't realize that, so I made things way harder for myself than I needed to. Even so, I still think the mission is a damn good one. As much as I thought the repetitive dying was bullshit at points, I feel now looking back that it was a mostly fair combat challenge for everything we've done up to this point. If you know what you're doing, you can work around combat entirely, or at the very least, make it easier for yourself. But if you're like me and you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to die a lot. Now we just have one more level left, so let's go ahead and finish the fight. Am I using that right? I'm not far enough ahead into the franchise to know what that means yet. The final mission, the Maw, has you returning back to where it all started, the Pillar of Autumn. It seems to have ended up in some sort of desert area after it crashed at the start of the game. After having a bit of a seemingly deliberate rough landing, you climb into an escape pod bay before having to fight your way through the ship. Gameplay-wise, this initial part of the mission isn't really that much different than the last. The tight corridors of the Autumn are filled with plenty of every type of enemy, and there isn't really much room to get around them, so you'll just have to fight your way through. Your goal is to reach the bridge in order to use Key's neural implants to overload the fusion reactor, just as Cortana had mentioned back in Mission 8, which should destroy Halo. Unfortunately, just as we get the detonation countdown started, our old pal Guilty Spark decides to interfere, stopping the countdown. He's trying to take the reactor offline, so Chief decides it best to just blow up the reactor himself. So, after finishing off the Sentinel sent your way, you continue fighting your way through to get to the engine room. Once there, you have to activate a switch to decouple the manifolds to give you access to a vent core. From here, a well-placed rocket or grenade will take out the vent core, and once you do this 3 more times, the fusion reactor will begin to decay, and that's your cue to make your escape. Before we get the hell out of here, I just want to mention that I really enjoyed this section, for the most part. Having to climb to activate a switch was kind of annoying, but it was chaotic enough to be a fun objective without being too obnoxious, having to keep enough enemies off of you to give you time to line up your explosive of choice each time. Back to the escape, you fight your way to a lift that takes you up to where the Marines store their vehicles. You are quickly alerted that the decay is happening faster than initially thought, and you need to take a vehicle to get the hell out. So yes, that means that the final stretch of the game is a timed escape segment where you get to drive the worst vehicle in the game again. You have 6 minutes to drive mostly straight to the marker on your map, and it is not fun. I beat it on my second try, but it wasn't enjoyable due to how the Warthog feels to drive. You have to zigzag around different obstacles, but it's more likely than not that you'll just bump into them, losing momentum due to the heaviness of the controls. You can see in the footage here I actually had better luck whipping my Warthog side to side before a turn, because the momentum of slamming the back end of my vehicle was enough to ricochet the vehicle back in place, reducing the lost momentum, which is kind of entertaining to watch. Not only is turning a mess, but there are plenty of spots where I think the intention is for you to jump over. But as I mentioned when I talked about Warthogs earlier, even the slightest drop is enough to flip your vehicle, which when you're on a damn time limit, just makes things a pain in the ass. There's this one spot towards the end where Cortana says that at full speed you can likely make the jump, and you can see in the footage that I try to maintain speed, but I end up just bumping into the landing spot before plummeting to the ground below. Then I just hit the ground and my Warthog just stops, the back end slowly descending to the ground. Okay, so I returned back to this, and it turns out you're not even supposed to make the jump anyway, so all that really does is just slow you down. I don't really get what the point of that is, especially when Cortana explicitly tells you that at full speed you can make the jump, so I don't know. When you get to your initial escape zone, Foehammer is supposed to come and pick you up, but she gets shot down. Rest in peace, Foehammer. I don't know why I haven't mentioned her until the end here, but she's usually the one responsible for your evacs and other little things throughout the game. Anyway, this means that you have to reach another point that has a ship that you can use for evac. My advice is that when you reach the first escape point, to just keep driving. Otherwise, you'll just lose valuable time that you could be using for your escape. I didn't do that the first time and waited for Foehammer, which got my Warthog blasted by a Banshee, which flipped it into such a spot that when I tried to turn it around to head to the next evac point, well... Oops. You get to the end of the escape sequence and there'll be some stuff blocking your way, so you'll just have to hop out and go on foot. There'll be some enemies as well, and it's up to you if you want to fight them or just make a mad dash for the end. You get to the ship and take off, the ring world blowing up behind you. Chief asks Cortana if anyone else survived, however, nobody else made it. Just you and Cortana. With that info, Cortana says Halo is finished. Chief removes his helmet as the camera pans away from the ship before stating,
"No, I think we're just getting started,"
indicating that there will be future installments. And well, ain't that the truth? This game blew the fuck up back when it came out, giving the Xbox a fighting chance against the other consoles of the time. More on that in a moment. First, I'll wrap up the mission discussion. The final level for Halo here was overall pretty good. First of all, the combat challenge was just as difficult as the other prior missions, with great enemy placements that really pushed you to your limits. Maybe not quite as hard as the previous mission, but still pretty tough. The fusion reactor segment was a great event for the final mission, something big and bombastic to send things off. The only shitty thing about it was that damn escape segment. Conceptually, it's pretty cool, but in execution, it ended up being incredibly clunky. It doesn't help that the game's frame rate would often drop due to explosions and fighting enemies. A common problem throughout the game, might I add, although it isn't too egregious in most cases aside from here. Ending with a decent enough cutscene to wrap things up as well as hint at a sequel, I'd say that the final mission succeeded at delivering a satisfying enough conclusion for the game. It appears Halo did not lose its momentum whatsoever. The ending third of the game managed to keep the combat engaging and would continuously up the challenge on the player. The 7th mission was perfect for training the player against the Flood before the game became an all-out war between the 3 factions. The 8th mission challenges the player in a more open space, including vehicle combat to keep things varied, while the 9th mission focuses on challenging the player in a more enclosed space, pushing the player to their limits. The final mission, while a bit clunky, served as a good send-off for the game, while leaving room open for a potential sequel if it ever achieved success. And success it did achieve, selling over 1 million copies by April of the following year, forever leaving its imprint on the gaming industry. So, that was the first Halo. Overall, not a bad game, just has a lot of jank and clunk, which is to be expected with the first entry into a franchise, especially one that's trying so many new ideas and innovations. When I first started writing this script, I came in with a much more negative mindset. To be honest, I did not enjoy Halo while I played it. Some parts I did enjoy, like the swamp with the Flood, which was a huge highlight. But a lot of the issues I've mentioned really stood out to me during the experience. Especially getting lost in the second mission made me way more critical of the rest of the game. Yet, as I began to look at the game separate from my early bias, I began to see why the game really took off back then. The sheer amount of passion that went into this game when designing it is as clear as day. The more I wrote the script, the more I kind of fell in love with the game from an artistic perspective. Everything put inside the game was thought out to some extent. The art direction and the music especially help blend the game together in my opinion. Not everything works, I think I've made that pretty clear, but the foundation here is incredibly strong. I think that the first Halo is actually a perfect mirror of the original Xbox itself. I mean, just look at this thing. It's rugged, clunky, and just a bit too bulky. Hell, even the original Duke controller, which I sadly do not have, is infamous for being a bit too big. But you can't deny, it has character, just like Halo. Halo is Xbox, and it's no surprise why they both became one of the big giants in gaming that they are now. Initially, Halo Combat Evolved had a bit of a rough start. Though not lacking in ambition, the first couple of missions really showed how clunky Halo could be. It would be that very ambition that would hinder the early game, with the second mission attempting a pseudo-open world design that was far too aimless in its direction. Adding in vehicle traversal didn't help the problem either, with the rough controls of the Warthog not doing the mission any favors. This lukewarm impression wouldn't last, however, as it didn't take very long for Halo to find its spark. It already had incredibly strong and well thought out enemy AI that even to this day other games struggle to rival. The actual mechanics of the FPS were strong as well, with an array of weapons that fulfilled different roles arguably better than most other first-person shooters. So, all Halo really needed was more focus and minor improvements. And from the third mission onwards, the game managed to do just that, learning from its early mistakes. Most later levels were more linear by nature, and the few that were more open were narrowed down in scope with much clearer direction. Later vehicles controlled much better, and weapon selection became more diverse as the game progressed. The sheer amount of passion poured in by everyone involved created something truly special that would go on to capture the hearts of millions. By the end of the game, Halo had created a strong foundation for not only future installments, but even for other games to follow and improve upon even further. Pair that with the online multiplayer that both the game and the console provided, this would prove that Xbox could be a worthy fighter in the console space, eventually becoming one of the big three that we know of today. In the end, although struggling to find its footing, Halo Combat Evolved learned incredibly quickly from its own mistakes, delivering upon a well-crafted and impressively innovative first-person shooter experience. Thus, ultimately proving that while ambition can easily overwhelm a project, with the right amount of tweaking and trimming, and perhaps dialing back the scope of certain parts, ambition can not only be delivered upon, but can leave an impact that can last decades, or perhaps even longer. Thank you all for joining me on this episode of Game Disdain. I look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Until then, I hope you all have a good night.